Good morning. Wednesday, the 22nd of April. We're talking about trusting God today, all week actually, during these 5 devotions. And we saw Joseph trusting God. We saw Solomon reminding us that the day of prosperity is set against the day of adversity, that the two are there that we need to consider in the day of adversity and look to Him and trust Him. Well, today I want to talk to you about obedience during all this time and what we ought to be doing. The Bible tells us in Romans chapter 7 and verse number 12, wherefore the law of God is holy and the commandment holy and just and good. The moral will of God that is given to us in the Bible is both rational and reasonable. The moral will of God. It's easy to discern what we need to do by looking at it. You know, if it says this is a sin, and we know why that's the case. The circumstances, however, in which we need to trust God by obeying them sometimes appear irrational. They appear difficult. We know what the Bible says, but here I am in this particular problem or situation. The law of God is readily recognized as good for us. Even when we don't want to obey it, it's still good for us. The circumstances in our life, like right now, we're going through this circumstance with this virus. We're just like, what do we do? And we don't know how to do it. But obeying God is always worked out within very well-defined boundaries of God's revealed will. So trusting God is always worked out in the arena of those boundaries of God's law. There's not a time that a man has to say, I don't know what to do. No, we do know what to do because God's law has given us the bounds in which we are to act. Now, there may be a complication of something in repairing something or taking care of something that we're not exactly sure what to do in, but when it comes to a moral decision, you and I as believers always have the law of God that lets us operate within boundaries. I remember when my children were small and I could say to them, we lived in an apartment complex, you can ride your tricycle on this sidewalk. Do not get off the sidewalk, do not get in the grass, and do not get in the parking lot. Now my children could ride as fast as they wanted. They could go back and forth up and down that sidewalk because their boundaries were clearly established. They knew not to get into the parking lot. They knew not to get off into the grass. And so they could have all the fun they wanted. The problem came in when their hearts were desiring to get outside of the bounds of the law of their father. And if they were wanting to go off into the parking lot, they knew this was a violation of my will. And if they wanted to get in the grass, they knew that was a violation of my will. And if they did, they would discover that trusting me and staying within the boundaries was more pleasant for them than if they had decided they were going to go against it. Now, we don't know the duration of this trial we're going through. We don't know that. We don't know the extent of it. We don't even know how painful it's going to get yet. It could get much more painful. It could get better. But in the midst of it, we do know that we have a command to trust God. So we are always coping with the unknown in our circumstances. Always. We always are. But the thing that is known is that the law is holy, the commandments are holy, and they are just, and they are good. So when you hit the wall of the circumstances and go, man, I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know, if they're going to let us go back to our normal duties. I don't know if I'm going to have enough money. What if I get sick? All of these unknowns that we crash into them knowing there is a boundary that God has given us to operate within, and we morally always know what to do. And part of that is trusting God in those circumstances, saying, Lord, I'm going to trust you in this. I don't know what it's going to look like in the end, but I know to be obedient in this by looking at your law. Your law is holy. The commandment is holy and just, and it's good. So the moral law that God has given to us is always rational. It's always reasonable. The circumstances that I've got to trust Him in might not always make sense. So my default is be obedient to those revealed commands of God, and I'll be blessed and cared for.